Good morning, everybody. Welcome back and welcome in. It is our November 2020 One Heart, One Earth Global Awakening event. I am your host, Lisa Gunshore, and I am so honored to start our day off with April Megginson talking about the alchemy of breath. Good morning, April.
Good morning. So good to see you.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you too. You're such a bright light for all of us. So it's a good way to start a Thursday morning.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so happy to be here today.
Me too. I want you to start out by just sharing a little bit about who you are for everybody who's not met you yet. We have so many new people in the community.
That's so exciting. So I am a yoga therapist, a certified life coach, and an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. And all those are just really tools in order to, my passion with what I do is to really identify our habits and patterns and mind, body, our entire self, and recognize those patterns and let them, give space around those things, and then figure out how to unwind them, which they naturally unwind when we recognize them. So the work begins there. But that to say that those are all of my tools in my toolbox that are really helping me out, with my clients and with my friends and, my community. So that's what I do. I teach online Zoom classes 3 times a week. So Mondays at 11, Wednesdays at 10:30 is actually a weight class, like with weights. And then Friday at 10:30. And those classes are really wonderful as far as even community goes. So I like to talk about less yoga therapy and more practical movement at this point. So linking together practical movement, because what's the point of doing something if it's not going to shine out through, the rest of our lives? And, practical movement is so important, because if we're going through our lives in pain and in discomfort, and we don't have to, if we know how we can align, then we have space for other things, So, a lot of practice with nervous system. And of course, today we'll be talking about breath itself. So that's a little bit about what I do.
Just a little bit of stuff.
Just a little bit. Oh, and I'm working on becoming a tea sommelier at the same time. So that's really fun, because that's kind of, people are like, why are you doing that? That sounds very strange. Tea is all that in a cup. In a beautiful teaware mug or whatever.
I love it. I think the tea sommelier is very interesting. Like, I love it because there's something like delicate about tea. I feel like it's like a very feminine, delicate thing. I mean, what do you think about that? Like, as you're learning about it, like, what's your thoughts about tea?
I think absolutely. I think that the reason why I got into it is because I read the Book of Tea, which was first, it's a set of lectures, and it was first published in 1911 or 1907, something like that. It's never been out of print. And it's really powerful. He talks about, the author is Okakura Kuzo. I think I said that correctly. But he talked about how there's teaism, or the way of tea is the philosophy of life, believe it or not. And so the 2 pillars of that, of many, is wabi, which is the impermanence. Like, lifting this cup of tea will never happen with you on this day at this moment again. So understanding presence is really powerful. And into that presence, we bring all of our senses. So when you do a tea tasting, you look at the dry leaves. You look at how the dry leaves are processed, and you start to understand how that process happens. And then you steep the leaves, and then you look at the wet leaves, and then you smell the aroma, and you see how they've blossomed and opened up. And then so you're not only seeing, you're touching, you put it in your hand, you kind of roll it around, you're feeling, you're smelling, So all of your senses are just really, really online and present. And that's incredibly powerful. And then the other pillar that I really love is beauty and imperfection. So there's just a lot of beauty in what we would consider imperfection. They have the beautiful pottery, the kintsugi pottery, that they break, and then they reattach with gold. So that's that idea that it was more beautiful after it was broken than before. So those are really powerful things. And that's basically, like I said, what I work with all these other techniques in a nutshell.
I love it. Don't you think that the human is sort of like that? I mean, once we're broken and put back together, it's just like now we're this amazing. We have all these, like you said, those gold bands throughout our being.
That's why I love it so much. Because that's us. That's us in a cup and in a nutshell and all of it. And that's why I love teaism, or the way of tea, because it's about presence. It's about training our senses, our awareness, basically, right? And it's about really appreciating what we might consider imperfect to be the most beautiful vessel.
I love it.
Yeah.
So for everybody who's listening, so April's presentation is on the OHO page. So it's oneheartoneearth.net, and just click on April Megginson, and she has her presentation in there and all of her information. But if you have questions for April about that, or just about her, or anything we talk about, or anything you'd like to share too, please put it in the comments section. And April, do you want to tell everybody just who's new to the community and hasn't dug into the presentations yet, maybe just a little bit about what you talk about, and then we'll kind of dive into where we feel like we want to go here this morning.
I'd love to. I have a lot to talk about with the breath, if you're interested, or if you're onto this.
Yeah.
So I've got some notes. I've got some, I'm such a teacher at heart that I just, I think it's really important to learn a lot of different ways through a lot of different avenues. So I've got, like these little handouts I'll be showing you. So I'm talking about the alchemy of breath in my presentation. And what I'm doing in my presentation, I'll actually enhance today, because I don't talk too much about the physical aspect of the alchemy of breath in my presentation. It's more practice. So what I have done is I work with the 4 parts of breath, which I'll talk about in a moment, in the presentation. And we work with kind of a Tong Lin, sort of very loose outline. And so on the inhale, we are inhaling. We start with the exhale, actually, which is really interesting in the presentation. And we exhale. We have a specific group that we work with, which I have right here, by the way. So our first group that we work with is those that we love. And we're exhaling to them the spirit of freedom. And then I do work with the pauses, which I think are powerful. So I have an exhale. You're sending freedom to the ones that you love most, or the one you love most. And you're finding that pause, and the pause between the inhale and the exhale, or excuse me, the exhale and the inhale is resting, allowing them to rest in being. And then on the inhale, you're inhaling for them ignorance, that they might, it's just a lack of awareness. And in so many, in all of us, that is what, and I think I talk about that. That's, maybe the biggest, everything's kind of wrapped up in lack of awareness. Once we become aware, it's like, oh, I understand now. So that's the inhale. And the pause between the inhale and the exhale is deep realization. So we do that with, we go through that with the one that you love, or those that you love. We go through that with someone that you're maybe less than fond with, or that there's some complicated feelings with. We do it with the most complicated feelings that you have, which are about yourself, right? About ourselves. And then we go in and we offer it to all beings. So that is, that's the practice. And it's much more of a practice than, I talk a little bit about, the alchemy of breath, but it's mostly a practice. And I think it's about 25 minutes long. So yeah,
I think it's beautiful. And, last night, Misa was talking about that when Misa, Julie, and I were talking about awakening last night at 6:00. Misa talked about drumming, and that a drummer has all this energy. This particular master drummer told her the reason that we have energy to drum for 12 hours is because we focus on the space between the beats. And so, yeah. And so I love what you're talking about. My husband's a drummer too, and he talks about that a lot. And so, I think when you talk about the space between the breath, I mean, we could talk for hours just about that.
Oh, we could. It's the gap. And if we can learn to cultivate that gap and understand it. So the 4 parts of breath, and I do talk a little bit about this in the presentation. But as I said, the exhale and the pause really represent water and air in a way. So the exhale I have, and I talk about this in my presentation, but I think it's good to just kind of go through it again. Exhale represents the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest, digest, nourish, heal. So this goes without saying that if our exhales are shorter than our inhales, then we're going to be in a state of fight or flight very often. The exhale represents calm, rest, sinking, dropping, melting, relaxing, unwinding, letting go, which is kind of this quality of air and water in a way. And I often, when I work with the breath, talk about ourselves being a container, which we are, of course, a container. It's just really visually helpful to imagine our breath like being water. Again, like both of those things fill up all the crevices, right? All the little spaces. So the pause in between is really powerful, between that exhale and between that inhale. That pause is representative of where we rest, the timelessness, abiding, suspension, that pure being. That's what is in that pause, believe it or not. And once we start to cultivate and understand this, we can see that. So the 2 pauses are nowhere, they're as different as the inhale and the exhale, right? So when we move into the inhale, it's about fire and earth. It's like, the inhale represents the sympathetic, the fight, flight, the action, right? The doing. So that's the creative force, the joyful action is what I call it. The pause between the inhale and the exhale is about potential, right? That's the top of the potential. It's about the top of the manifestation of the remembering, the realization, the unlocking, right? So if we don't have all 4 parts of this breath, or if we haven't cultivated or even really thought much about the pauses, then we're missing a lot of that, what I call the microcosm and the macrocosm of ourselves. So when we start to balance breath, our breath is an absolute recipe for balance, because we need all of those things in balance, right?
That's a lot in just the breath.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's really, really profound. It's profound. So if you'd like me to, I'll talk about the physically what goes on with the breath, because I think that's interesting to know.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I appreciate, if I could talk, appreciate about you, April, is you have such a knowledge of anatomy and physiology, and I really love that, because I sort of love I'm sort of nerdy that way. So I love that information, because I'm so focused on the energy piece that I sometimes forget about that piece, and it's part of being human, And so, yeah, let's do it. I want to learn about this.
Yeah. Well, in understanding that, it's about the avenue we move in through, and that could be the energetic piece, or it could be the physical piece. And what I find is that a lot of people really connect physically more quickly than they can to the other, which it's all affecting all of the same things, right? So we move in one avenue and it affects the whole, no matter what avenue we're moving in through, or what, as yoga calls it, the kosha, the subtle layers that we're moving into. And sometimes, the first kosha is literally translated as the food sheath, which I love, right? Because that's just so easy to move into. Like, it's so concrete and here, you're not you're not scaring anyone off with talking about that piece, because everyone knows what it feels like to have a body.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So physically, I've been, one of my dear friends gave me this book called Breath, and it's really what I've worked with for quite a long time anyway. Mm. But, you know, some of the things in here that he talks about are really powerful. So I'm going to actually, if that's all right, read to you.
Yeah.
Just for a moment. This is Breath by James Nestor, and it's on page 61. And it's a little long, but I've read this to my my students and my call them my people many times over the last few months, because you know, hearing it just reinforces, and it's also like pretty profound to understand how we work. When we understand how we work, a lot unwinds very quickly rather than having to work so hard for it. It's about this effortless effort that allows us to unwind with, again, breathing that ignorance, right? So it's a layer that ignorance just drops away, which is powerful, I find. Normally, the blood coursing through our arteries and veins at any one time does a full circuit once a minute, an average of 2,000 gallons of blood a day. This regular and consistent blood flow is essential to delivering fresh, oxygenated blood cells and removing waste. What influences much of the speed and strength of this circulation is the thoracic pump. I'm going to show you pictures of this in a moment. The name for the pressure that builds inside the chest when we breathe. As we inhale, negative pressure draws blood into the heart. As we exhale, blood shoots back out into the body and lungs where it recirculates. It's similar to the way the ocean floods into the shore and then ebbs out. So I'm not quite finished with that reading, but I think it's easier to see what I'm talking about sometimes. And hopefully you can see this.
Oh, look at you. I love this.
Yeah, right? Oh, let's see.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, so you can see that the breathing in, the chest expands, and you can see where the diaphragm is here.
Mm-hmm.
And see how the diaphragm contracts. And then breathing out, the chest contracts. What does that say right there? Diaphragm relaxes, correct? Yeah. Okay, and here, let me just show you what the diaphragm looks like in case you people don't know. So this, going this way. So the diaphragm looks like a parachute, or you're going to hear it called an umbrella in a moment. And this is what it looks like. So this is front body right here. And then that's how the diaphragm goes. It goes the entire circumference of our rib cage.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's profound once we understand something about this. So that's where the thoracic pump is. What powers our thoracic pump is the diaphragm, the muscle that sits beneath the lungs in the shape of an umbrella. Our diaphragm lifts during exhalations, which shrinks the lungs, which you just saw in that one picture, and then drops it back down to expand them during inhalations. This up and down movement occurs within us some 50,000 times a day. 50,000, wow. Right? So this is what's powerful. A typical adult. This isn't an adult in a disease state. This isn't an adult that, this could be somebody that works out. This is a typical adult. A typical adult engages as little as 10% of the range of the diaphragm when breathing, which overburdens the heart, elevates blood pressure, and causes circulatory issues. Extending those breaths from 50 to 70% of the diaphragm's capacity will ease cardiovascular stress and allow our bodies to work more efficiently. For this reason, the diaphragm is sometimes referred to as our second heart, because it not only beats to its own rhythm, but affects the rate and strength of the heartbeat. And I'll show you why. Because this is what it looks like. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's the diaphragm. And you see how it lifts up the heart and then pushes it back. So if our diaphragm is only at 10%, now we have to use our diaphragm to breathe. It's impossible. It's our primary respiratory muscle. We can't breathe without the diaphragm. However, are we getting enough breath into the diaphragm? And what that book says is no, a typical adult does not. So not only does it have circulatory problems, issues, as you can see, because it's so connected to the heart, right under that, of course, is our digestive organs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're not breathing well, we're having digestive issues also. So the two things, if you're having low back pain, the two things I work with, believe it or not, that will absolutely, very, very most likely heal low back pain is learning to breathe better with your diaphragm and turning on your gluteus maximus. Those are your two things with low back pain.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right?
It is crazy. And our glutes, we don't use those very often. My favorite thing to do when I'm teaching yoga is when you think of tree pose, is I have everybody in the class lay on their stomach and put their leg up into tree pose, and then try to lift their knee off the floor without actually using anything to do that. And the minute you do that is the minute you realize how absolutely you are not using those muscles at all.
That's such a good way to do that. Yes.
Oh, it's awesome, because if you do it and you have them do it on each side, then when you actually stand up to do tree, suddenly those muscles have been activated and you can feel the difference between using those muscles and not. But it's hard. It's really, really hard to lift your knee up using only your glutes. And so it's a really fun exercise to do in class. Every once in a while, I'm like, everybody go lay down, because we're going to do something fun.
We're going to use that.
Yeah, it's crazy because your glutes, you just don't, I don't think anyone realizes how much we don't use those.
Yeah. And that's what partly the work I do very subtly. It's about skillfully, first of all, again, here we go back to becoming aware of our habits, and then realizing, like, if our low back, it doesn't have a lot of muscles in it, right? Our back body of our lower back doesn't have a lot of muscles. Our abs have 5 layers. Our glutes are huge. Those are our primary postural muscles. And if we're not using them and we're using our secondary muscles most often, then we are in a lot of discomfort and we're probably not breathing well.
Yeah.
So diaphragm is heart. Immunity just goes without saying. When we're breathing well, we're getting all the air out at the end of the exhale. And of course, we're getting enough fresh oxygenated blood moving through. As you see, if we're not breathing well, then we have, it's basically every issue under the book in a way. So not only does the heart have an issue, our immunity has an issue, all these little muscles, you can see there's little muscles in between the rib cage here. They're called the intercostal muscles right here. Each one of these has a little muscle. If the diaphragm isn't pushing those muscles out, then we're atrophied. We're creating a lot of atrophy in our upper bodies. And that's why we have a lot of shoulder issues, a lot of neck issues, because our diaphragm isn't moving our bodies as they were meant to be moved. So that's really,
by the way, in 2021, I'm making a note right now. I think you and Deanna from Block Therapy need to have a little chat.
Yeah.
But I imagine, that the block is like literally something that's working through exactly what you're talking about. And I bet you guys have a lot to talk about.
I think so. I've listened to her a few times and she's amazing.
She is. She's just awesome. So anyway, I'm really struggling. The tissue or whatever in between my side, on the side of my ribs here is the worst. So this tissue you're talking about, it's like important. Mine is not happy.
Right. And that's, there's a lot of things we can do to practice that. The other really interesting thing this book talks about is sleep apnea, which is, which, by the way, I'll grab this book again if you don't mind.
Yeah, do it.
It's really interesting because I didn't realize this. 45% of adults snore occasionally, and a quarter of the population snores constantly. 25% of American adults over 30 choke on themselves because of sleep apnea, and an estimated 80% of moderate or severe cases are undiagnosed. That's
whoa.
So yes, I know. And I don't think I highlighted this other thing, but it talks about how sleep apnea goes into a rash of other issues, not even circulatory at this point. It goes into hypertension, neurological issues come up, and autoimmune issues come up because of lack of being able to breathe well when we sleep. And of course, that goes without saying, sleep is a really powerful medicine for healing. So if we're not able to sleep well or rest when we're sleeping, there's a difference between rest and sleep. That's what's interesting. And if we're not able to rest while sleeping, then these things are going to start to come out.
Yeah.
So, and our nervous system, here's the other interesting thing. There's a lot of interesting things. I keep saying interesting. I know that's I say that a lot. It just is, right?
Yeah. I agree. I think this stuff's fascinating. I'm taking notes while you're talking. So I'm like, I'm going to look up this and that. Yeah.
Well, if we have what's called scientifically forward head posture, which I'm going to show you, if we have forward head posture, so I always talk about ears, shoulders, hips, all being in alignment. I'm not right now because I'm twisted, but you can kind of see how my ear and shoulder are in alignment here. Now watch this vertebrae right here. I'll put this finger on it. Every inch I go forward with forward head posture, that's the actual scientific name, by the way, forward head posture. Every inch I go forward, I put 10 pounds of pressure on this vertebrae. I've got 10 pounds of pressure. I've got 20 pounds of pressure. I have 30 pounds of pressure. I have 40 pounds of pressure, maybe 50. We see this. The other thing that happens here is I'm actually decreasing my oxygen by 40 or 50%. So if you think about that, if our body is not getting enough oxygen throughout the day, guess what state we're going to be in constantly?
Exhausted.
Fight or flight state, right? Fight, freeze, appease. We're going to be, there's so many things that come along with that because we don't have a balanced nervous system. We react really strongly instead of responding well because we don't have the capacity. We don't have the space. We're in a certain, physical system. And a lot of these reactions, and especially we see this in our world today, a lot of these reactions are just about us being in a fight or flight state. It's not about us being bad people, right? It's about this idea of not knowing what it feels like to rest. And a lot of that's, as you can see, I'm building my case for that being very much physical. And that's why the physical body is so important to continue to work with and become aware of, even when, the spiritual piece or the energetic piece may be there, because we can continue to unwind. And what happens is when we start to support a balanced nervous system through better breathing, because we're not gasping for air all the time, right? And as soon as we start to breathe and get our heads back and stop cutting our air supply off, our body, it's a direct link to our body. We're literally saying to our bodies, you're okay. Everything's all right. You're safe. If we're like this all day, you're saying to yourself, I'm not safe. I'm not safe. Where's the danger? Where's the danger? Who's going to hurt me? What's going on? Right? That hypervigilance like that is a state of a sympathetic state. And of course, we need to continue with the sympathetic state. It's the thing that saved our lives so many times. We slam on the brakes. We do whatever. But if we don't have that other piece of our parasympathetic being balanced, and a lot of this, like I said, is also through breath. That's the state, right? As I said before, the state of exhalation and that pause of the exhalation is the parasympathetic state. That's the state that we drop into. So when we do get messages and we hear and we connect together, we're connecting in a parasympathetic state. And if somebody can't get there, then how are they supposed to connect? Like it just is almost impossible in a way. And that's what's so amazing about us as human beings is somehow, even in those states, we do figure out how to connect, right? We do still figure out how to connect. It's just that there's deeper connection available when we realize these things in our physical bodies, which is, why I love this so much.
Yeah, well, and I think it's worth noting too that your spinal fluid, like the fluid and blood flow and everything for your brain also is with this posture. And I have that challenge with the hunching and the coming forward, and some of it's genetic and some of it's just me and something I've been working on for a while. But if I'm feeling tired during the day, this is like my little trick for everybody, is if you're feeling tired, you're sitting in front of the computer, whatever, I just pull my chin in and like really roll my shoulders back and get that fluid and everything moving. And I take some really deep breaths. And my God, you have like a whole new outlook for the next couple hours. I mean, it's really amazing how much we start to do this and this all throughout the day. You get lower and lower. If you kind of bring yourself up and pull that chin in and bring yourself back into that alignment, it's pretty amazing. When you look at your ear to your shoulder, that was what got me. When I was in yoga teacher training, and we looked at the ear to the shoulder, and I saw how far forward I was. And my husband, we were all checking, each other at home. And it was like, holy crap, like we really are like way off kilter from where we should be. So what you're saying is so important.
Well, and what I say about that also is that we can give ourselves a lot of grace, because first of all, I call it like the Grand Canyon, the Colorado carving out the Grand Canyon. I mean, that is not, you didn't do that once. We all, everything we do, the trajectory is forward. We're on our phones, we're on our computers, we're cooking, we're doing this, we're doing that. So fine, that's there. We can do that better and more aligned. And also we can have grace with ourselves that that's going to happen. And we know the antidote to that. Go lie on the floor, not the bed, because the floor will press your musculoskeletal system down. There's so many antidotes. So once we realize like, oh, it's okay that I'm like that, because I walk by the mirror all the time and I find myself, oh, there we go again, right? And that's okay. I don't dwell on the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm teaching this stuff and look at my posture. I can't believe it. I just say, oh, there I am again. Pull my head back, get my belly engaged, get my glutes engaged, depending on what I'm doing. And, it's just kind of a constant check-in of presence. And I think that's powerful to understand that if you've had a pattern for 20, 30, 40 plus years, you're not going to change that pattern overnight. Your bones are follow that pattern at that point, right? But however, we can come out of it way more quickly than we can go into it with awareness and work. But it's not just about holding your shoulders back. My mom used to say that, and I always laugh at her now, because it's like, watch what happens when I hold my shoulders back. Nothing, yep. Because our shoulders are not doing anything, right? It's our rib cage. It's how our shoulders sit and how our head sits on our rib cage, which is a really interesting awareness too. So, there's all these points we can check in with if we've got mirrors or whatever. And, the yogis talk about the golden spine, which I often talk about as well. So noticing, I really often talk about the Four Noble Acts as well, as far as what I teach. And that's standing well, lying well, walking well, and sitting well. And those are not easy things. And we have to come out of all these habits surrounding all those things in order to even get back to ground zero. And ground zero, this whole thing is about remembering who we are, right? It's not about adding. That's what the amazing thing is. What I teach is not about adding. It's about taking away and moving back to our natural states of who we are. It's about remembering that we already have the potential. We're not weak. We're just misaligned sometimes, which, takes off the pressure. We give ourselves permission to just live a human life in a way that way.
Yeah. We have so many great comments. Marlena says, hi Marlena and Claire and Rebecca and Michelle. Marlena says, I have noticed before that I slip into that posture when I'm anxious. Claire says, wow, makes so much sense as to why I'm edgy and exhausted so much of the time. I sit sewing all day, hunched over and with my forward head posture way out of alignment. Marlena says, I had never heard that ear to shoulder cue. That's really helpful. Rebecca says, April is a fabulous teacher. She is so knowledgeable. I love her classes and talks. And Michelle says, don't massage your ears with your shoulders.
Ah! I love that. Yeah, that's the whole other thing. In my classes, I talk about all this, like, hi, Rebecca, how Rebecca said, you know, a really good cue to tell yourself and ask yourself throughout the day, two things. I have a lot of cues. There's just so much efficiency in them. Do your arms feel light and unburdened? And does your head feel light and unburdened? And if either of those answers are no, then it's coming from your posture. Your rib cage is your posture. Your hips and pelvis and belly are your posture. Your upper arm bones just plug right in basically to your shoulder socket, which is sitting and floating atop your rib cage. So your arms don't have anything to do with posture. And I'm sure that's controversial. Let me re-say that. Your arms follow your posture. How about that? Your head follows your posture. So when you get your rib cage balanced well, and you get your hips balanced well, your arms and head are going to be in the correct place. Now that takes some work. If you're doing this, then all these muscles are atrophied here, and our pecs are part of posture. Our pecs press us back, right? Our pecs really allow us to have open collarbones here. But if we're like this, we can't just come out of this, right? There's too much fascia. There's too many muscles that are tight and locked short, as we say, and just underused. So this just takes a little bit of time. And yet our bodies, here's what I love about what I do. Our bodies are 100% of the time, from the first breath we take to the last breath we have, are at potential for misalignment or alignment. And okay, we go into misalignment sometimes. Who cares? It's fine. We just have to know, like I said, we can do things a little bit more aligned. And then if we do go into misalignment, we just take the antidote of that. It takes all the pressure off, because it's like, I should have better posture. No, that's not doing anything. Should doesn't mean anything, right? I should hold my head back. I shouldn't sew, right? No, you can just do it better. So if you're at a computer or you're typing or you're reading, I always talk about how our shoulders do not have eyes on them, right? Our eyes are our eyes. You don't need to hunch forward like this. There's a great picture of Mark Twain, and you can look at it in the Victorians. What he's doing is he's tilting his head down. Our head is meant to do that, right? So let me grab my phone. Here we go. I'm on my phone. Pretty good, right? Not this. Yeah. So I mean, it's really powerful once you know these little tricks. If you're sewing, I love doing these practical things. It makes
me too. It's fun.
Good. If you're sewing, then of course you're going to be a little forward. However, I would say as much as possible, get your sewing machine towards you, because this right here, this ratio right here, takes the pressure off your shoulders and neck. Our arms are meant to do this. You can put them in catalepsy, actually, where you can do this little thing with your arms and then they'll just stay there, because this is an alignment that our body likes. This is not an alignment that our body likes, right? So all you have to do is see, am I at 90 degrees here? And am I looking down with my eyes at a diagonal rather than forward with my shoulders? So again, that question comes into play. That's really powerful. Are my head and are my arms feeling light and unburdened? And if they're not, fix it.
I love it. Michelle has a question. She said, what sleeping position do you recommend, and what type of pillow or mattress?
I just had this question last night on another presentation I did.
Oh, that's awesome.
I would recommend, it's a very loaded question. Okay. You can train yourself to back sleep. Sleeping on your back is going to be most healthy for your musculoskeletal system. So we go back into the idea of the Four Noble Acts. Lying well is one of those Four Noble Acts. If we don't lie down well, say this is me lying down, then shoulders get pressed down, legs relax, head goes back, right? So we reset when we lie on our backs. We reset. I would suggest that you do a 10-minute or 15-minute really pretty sounding timer, not like a scary alarm, because that'll take you into fight or flight. But, before you go to bed, you don't even have to get under the covers yet. Just back train where you set a 10-minute or a 15-minute timer and you just lie there. And at the end, you may feel like, oh, I'm super uncomfortable, but it'll get easier and easier and easier. And you can lengthen the time. And eventually you don't need a timer and you'll just sleep on your back. I go from all sides at night, but I do start out and I usually do end on my back. Because again, it's really important to lie flat and let gravity reset you. I mean, that's just how we're made, right? Mm-hmm. We need to reset. We are up and down all day long, and that is a lot. Think about what we have to contend with being these vertical bodies. It's a lot that we have to contend with, And so, first of all, we should be amazed that we can even stand upright, because how is that even possible? It's really amazing to me, right? And then we can just say, okay, well, there's my antidote. I'm gonna back train. Now, as far as a pillow, what I have for my pillow, I don't have one. I do have a Tempur-Pedic mattress, and it's firmer. But my pillow is actually a feather down pillow, because that way my head can sink in and I'm not pushing. If you have a pillow that's a Tempur-Pedic or something, or like a foam mattress, then you're pushing your head forward all night. If you're a side sleeper, that's a different pillow. It's a different pillow.
Yeah, so this is interesting, April, because I am a side sleeper. Like, I definitely side sleep. But here's the thing. It's easier to astral travel in the lucid state if you're on your back. It's actually very difficult for your energy body to leave when you're on your side. So I kind of have this joke with myself that, like, I keep myself from going places, which I still do anyways. But anyways, one thing I've noticed this year since I've been doing block therapy and really starting to work on the rib cage and the posture, and of course my yoga practice, is if I'm really disciplined with it, I switch to back sleeping. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I think it's interesting, because what I feel just intuitively is it seems like the more I'm releasing fascia and getting my body into correct alignment, all of a sudden I want to sleep on my back. I want to rest. And, there's also the old beauty saying, sleeping on your back prevents those wrinkles, because your skin lays back. If you sleep on your side or down, you can push. So actually it does help you. And believe it or not, there are lots and lots of people out there, women, who try to sleep on their back just for the wrinkle thing.
I understand that. But I think that's interesting, because again, it goes back to posture and the golden spine and breath. So when we're sleeping on our backs, it's got to be right? I mean, let me just say this. I remember my first yoga teacher training. And before that, I had such I have a super long torso. I've got, as you can see, my joints are like kind of small. I mean, this is just how I've always looked. And so there's a lot of pains and discomfort that comes from having a really long torso and not knowing how to hold it upright and all. That's why I do what I do, because I experienced so much pain in my 20s and 30s. And so I was doing Shavasana, which is corpse pose at the end of yoga, and I absolutely detested it for years.
Me too.
Stand it. And no one told me, because I don't know that anyone knew this, because if you're 200-hour or trained, that's amazing, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting all of the subtleties of things. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that anyone knew it, but I hated it. And finally somebody came and propped me. They put a thing under my head. They put a bolster under my knees, and I literally melted into myself and started sobbing. Because my body finally found rest. But the interesting thing is, what I kind of had to deal with was this idea in class and in my earlier teacher training parts was that I was too high strung, and I might have been, who knows, but I was too high strung and that I couldn't rest. Like it was like this thing I couldn't do and you're not good enough. Like that's how I felt. And no one told me the potential to rest is already there. It's just we have to get the right position for ourselves. So if you're not comfortable on your back, give yourself a little grace. Put some pillows under your knees. Get comfy. Listen to your favorite music for 10 minutes and get yourself into a classical conditioning state where you enjoy lying on your back. It doesn't have to be this like rigid, awful feeling thing. In fact, it has to be opposite of that because that's where our natural state is. And again, the more we, move into musculoskeletal breath alignment, the more those 4 noble acts of sitting well, standing well, walking well, and lying well will become more and more and more and more natural, and you'll be able to do them longer, and you won't have all the discomforts that we're feeling because of the habits that we have created.
Yeah, and what you're saying is so huge. I feel really blessed that my primary teacher for yoga teacher training was very alignment and prop oriented. And I'm so grateful for that because what I learned more than anything else in yoga teacher training, besides the fact that I love alignment also so much, but part of why is because what I learned was how to use the props. I think one thing that everyone can do for themselves is grab the freaking props when you are at a studio, or now that you're home, order the props and have them for yourself if you're doing home practice or doing Zoom classes or whatever, because it's almost like we need to be taught how to use the props. And that's what I learned in that, just like you're talking about with the bolster and things. It's like, I thought, man, I couldn't do downward dog. I was like, it hurts my hamstrings. And once you learn, oh, well, actually, maybe I need to do it with a chair. Like I did it with a chair last year and now I don't have to. I've worked up to not, but you know what I'm saying? Like really understanding how to get yourself in alignment in a position that's comfortable. It shouldn't be uncomfortable. It shouldn't be this awful thing. And like you said, I mean, there's all these things of like, oh, I have to use a prop, or there's the opposite too. You see people with their props, you're like, oh, they know everything. And it's really just about like knowing how to take care of your body and learning that. So it's so important what you're saying is like, just get yourself comfortable. And Michelle says, when I sleep on my back, oftentimes I wake up with lumbar pain, is what Michelle's saying.
Bolster under the knees, pillows under the knees will take that away.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh, April, time just flies in here. Can you believe it?
I know. And I didn't even get to talk about the actual, other parts of connecting with the breath. Can I do that real fast?
Yeah, do it.
So this is in my presentation, but I wanted to start out with the physical, and here we are almost an hour later, right?
Yeah.
But the breath physically, as you can see, directly affects, I think I touched on this earlier, our own connections. So if we're not getting deep breath, we're going into a fight or flight state, our connections get very fuzzy, right? We get annoyed quickly, or if we have fight, we're annoyed, we're angry. Somebody can walk into a room and it'll go, "Arr!" Right? Or if we have flight, we're like which is fine, by the way, to binge watch TV or whatever, because it just happens sometimes, and that's just what we need to do, and that's fine. But as a habit is our flight state, our appease state. Oh, it's okay. I'll get it. Don't move. I'll get it. Right. You don't want to ruffle any feathers.
Yep.
And so if we're acting out of those states, we're connecting all the time because that's what we are. We're not consciously connecting. Let's say it that way. So again, going back to the 4 parts of breath, those 4 parts of breath are the balance of you. It's your microcosm within your macrocosm. So you checking in with your breath, there's a lot that happens. If you're not finding that pause between the inhale and the exhale, maybe there's issues with some manifestation, right? Maybe there's not a realization happening. Maybe you feel stuck. So the breath actually energetic space changes and gives us that little open door that we can open all the way, which is really profound. Our breath is a tune-up. So when you start to do this breath work and you know, exhales, I really work with strongly, because exhales are what we need in our culture and society to cultivate our parasympathetic state. And at the end of that exhale, when you start to find that pause there is the deepest, most still suspension of being, of timelessness. There's this amazing curtain that opens up to who we are in that pause. So it's a tune-up, and it's this is part of what I said in my presentation. It's one of the things. Breath is one of the things, if not the thing, that is most powerful about our physical embodiment. Not to mention that breath is our life force, right? And there's a lot of discussions around prana, which is life force in Sanskrit, right? But you know, does prana come in with oxygen? Is it already there? There's all these little philosophical discussions around it, and yet we know without the breath, our physical body dies. So there's prana. The alchemy of breath manifests in many ways. We already talked about the physical ways. Now, you know that if you're feeling good physically and you're feeling balanced physically, that opens the door to balance across our entire self, capital S self. Sleeping better, connecting to ourselves and higher forces better, right? So that opens us up to our actual source, capital S source. So that's why this is so important. There's two really great things. All ingredients are already present within you to adjust into balance and connection to ourselves and others. There's ways to do this. You can, if you are about to have a challenging conversation, you can walk in and sit, and you don't even have to tell the person you're doing this. You can match their breath. And already you've changed the energy. You can match their breath. You just watch them inhale, you watch them exhale. And then what happens is, because we're so intuitive as human beings, even if they don't consciously know it, you can start to control the breath and deepen breaths for both of you, which is really cool, right?
Yeah.
Collective breathing is really big. So if you're in a yoga class or you want to pop into one of my classes and we're all breathing together, that creates incredible amounts of powerful energy. And, you know, I say a lot of words, like I say interesting, powerful, trajectory. I know I say them all the time. They're just good words, by the way. And then singing, that's why singing is so wonderful, because first of all, we're singing in unison and we have the whole sound piece. However, when you're singing, you are elongating your exhales, which takes you into a parasympathetic state. That's why singing is so profound. And that's why it is in so many different traditions, all traditions, basically. And then, of course, the transmutation of breath itself is what the practice actually is. So if you are feeling disconnected, or you're having, maybe an issue with someone, or you're not feeling like you're like fond of someone, going in and working with the breath here in a Tonglen sort of style, and that means give take, by the way, is really profound for changing how we feel about someone. So I remember I've done Tonglen so long. There's been a couple of times where my heart has just broken open with love and like into this really joyful, connected, beautiful state, because this is the thing. This is that little tiny space that opens up where the source flows in, or our connection to self flows in, where we glimpse what we already are, what we glimpse that wholeness that we already are. We already are that, you know? I am that. You've heard that so many times. We are that already. It's just polishing it up and really unlayering more than anything else, remembering more than anything else. And that's what the power is. The alchemy of breath goes beyond language, as we can see.
I love you, April. Give everybody your website really quick.
April Renee, AprilRenee.co. Don't do the com. There's some photographer that'll come up. It's .co.
Awesome. Well, I love you, April, and we'll see you again here very soon. And everyone, I'll be back in about 4 minutes with Delisa Hawking, and we're going to be talking about your intuition. So thank you guys. Oh, and the book was Breath by James who? Say that again because they're asking.
Nestor. Oh, go that way.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go. All right, guys, have a nice 4 minutes. I'll be back. I love you, April.
Love you. Thank you.
Bye.